So let's see if we can't break this down as far as the tools are concerned. I'm going to be doing this from a 10,000 foot view look. Anybody remember the old adage that the best way to survive a bear attack is not to be the slowest runner, or to survive a shark attack is easy? All you have to do is be a faster swimmer than the person next to you. And that's kind of the way that security was done not so long ago. As long as you had a better than average security plan or devices in place, you were likely safe because someone else would get hit first. And attackers were always going for what we refer to as the low-hanging fruit. But this has changed quite a bit. So when you're choosing your particular software products to help you out, or even hardware products to help you out with intrusion detection, you want to do a couple things. First, you need to know that, yep, there's a plethora. Yeah, I got to use my word again. But there's a plethora of choices out there. Some of the tools and appliances that you might find do one specific thing, or it may be just a one particular tool, while other tools could actually be a suite of solutions for you. Again, you're going to have to evaluate these on your own and determine what's best for your environment. The other thing that you want to consider is the cost and relationships. Now, when I talk about costs, I want you to think about two different things. First, obviously, open source is great. Everybody loves it because they're like, hey, it's free, but support may not necessarily be there. Now, your other choice could obviously be paid products. And again, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with those. Sometimes costs can be an issue for you. So you got to pick, again, a good balance. Now, when I also talk about costs, I also want you to think about what it's going to cost you not to deploy if something happens. Actually, I'm going to change that and say when something happens, because it's going to happen. In fact, some latest statistics show us that organizations with over 5,000 computers, over 90% of them have actually an active breach of some sort at any given time. And of course, most of them don't even know about it. So again, you have to think about the costs long term, or as I refer to it as the big picture. Now, another thing you want to take into consideration here is, and this kind of goes back to the paid versus open source, but the relationship that you might have with that vendor. What type of support do they offer? If you're using outside consultants to help you out for your security, or maybe cloud-based security mechanisms, again, you want to make sure that you know who has access to what resources, and don't take it as a given that any third party has everything under control. Again, when we start interacting with third parties, they become a possible vector force. The great example here is the Target breach. The attackers were able to breach Target's credit card machines via the air conditioning and heating systems because the vendor that was responsible for that wasn't secure. And when it comes to these relationships, you might look at trying to hold your vendors and partners to the same standards that you're trying to actually lay down. It's important to actually define your security requirements up front with these folks. Also, make sure that your organization maintains control at all times of your data, especially with offshore data storage or services. Now, something else you want to take into consideration is learning to protect the crown jewels. Now, technically, we need to go through ahead of time and identify or assess what is our most critical data. And that could either be resources or even actual documents or data itself. Now, don't hesitate to ask individuals within your company for their help and to try to figure out what needs to be safeguarded, because they have a better idea than we might. And in fact, if I haven't drilled this into your brain enough, I'll say it again. Your first line of defense when it comes to security is your users or your employees. Make sure that everyone is involved. Don't operate in silos when it comes to security. Give your employees regular updates, training, and education on how they can safeguard their data. And I'm going to throw it at you again. Remember my analogy of the Alamo? Remember, your goal here is to provide an environment that helps you in breach detection. And you're creating that last line of defense against attacks instead of just focusing on an initial wave of intrusion. A lot of companies actually focus in on what we refer to as after the fact detection. It's been around for a long time because, our IDS systems say, hey, by the way, this happened. Our SIMs can also fall short in this type of protection. And the reason why this happens is because they're relying on rules or signature-based breaches, or possibly we're being overloaded with hundreds or even thousands of alerts that these devices give us, and those alerts sometimes can be false positives, and we become complacent in looking at that information. So now that we've set the ground rules, let's get in and take a look at some of the different categories of tools.